we used to get a lot of people just pure link asks, and I feel like we get less of those. And they were always, I have like a video on it. Normally when people ask for link building versus content marketing, it's the wrong philosophy, or the business isn't doing well generally when I see that. So the good news is that's starting to kind of tailor off a little bit. I do think people are resonating with the just data-driven approach. I mean, why wouldn't they be?
Hey, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Briefly. Today we've got Ross Hudgens, who's the founder and CEO of an agency called Siege Media. Siege has been around for 12 years this August, so Ross has been at this for a while. The company has more than 100 full-time employees. They're fully remote. It's actually a really remarkable story, just given all the chaos that this industry has been through over the last year and a half or so. Obviously that affected Siege also, but they've come through it okay because they grew sustainably, built a healthy culture, did so many things right that are so easy to get wrong. And so Ross explains some of that, some of the growing pains they've been through, talks about the origin story also. Just overall, really appreciated his candidness and thoughtfulness. And then of course you get his take on kind of the broader SaaS and content world, given that he gets to see and talk to a lot of different businesses. So really good stuff. As always, I really enjoyed this conversation and I hope you do too. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Verblio. Verblio just released their 2024 State of Digital Content Report based on responses from 125 marketers. 79% of them agreed that the bar for quality is going up. We all know that surface level blog posts won't rank like they used to. And if you're struggling to keep up with content production in this new world, Verblio can help. They partner with in-house marketers to create publish-ready content at any scale for 40% of the price of leading content agencies. The Verblio team will source and manage subject matter expert writers for you, so you can publish that authoritative content that the algorithm loves. And for tool-savvy marketers, they'll set up custom integrations and workflows that fit into how you're already doing content. Verblio's been in the game for 15 years and has produced over 1 million posts, so they understand AI, EEAT, and the shifting winds of SEO. If Google has recently cut your site traffic in half, give Verblio a try. They can be your end-to-end content partner, take work off your plate, and help you get out of Google jail. Check them out at verblio.com. Content Briefly is produced by our friends at Minutia. To learn more about their podcast production service, as well as their other adaptive content marketing services, check out minutia.com in the show notes. Hey everybody, Jimmy from Superpath here today with Ross Hudgens, founder of Siege Media, an agency that I have long respected and followed. Read your content, watched your YouTube stuff. We have met before, but we haven't had the chance to record that so other people can learn about you and about Siege. So we'll get a chance to do that today. I have tons of questions for you, Ross, but maybe first, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about Siege too?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jimmy. I constantly reference your post on the blog as a library, not a public. Well, that was your post, right?
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah. Love that one. Still say blogs are libraries to this day. So a lot of respect for you and as a content marketer. But to answer your question, I'm Ross, founder, CEO of Siege Media. We're around 100 people, fully remote content / SEO agency. Primarily working in SaaS, but also work in fintech and e-com consumer markets as well.
Okay, cool. And you've been at this 12 years, 13 years? I mean, Siege been around.
Yeah, we're getting gray. I'm getting some gray. 12 in August, actually. So just on that milestone.
Okay, really cool. One of the things I want to ask you about is what's the arc of Siege? I guess first, how did it start? What's the origin story? But then as content SEO have changed, which they've changed a lot over those years, have there been seasons to Siege Media where the focus ends up in different places? And then where are you today? I'm sorry, I'm asking you to talk about 12 years of your life in a couple minutes. But how did you start? And then kind of what's the trajectory been like?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe the most helpful thing for listeners potentially is I was in-house and I was just hustling on the side, building my personal brand, and knew that would kind of result in something. So got a few clients on the side, had a boss that micromanaged me, and decided to quit. I didn't like that. Figured I'd give this thing a go and quit. And I was an SEO consultant, but also was a content writing major for a long time, became business. I say I sold out. So I was a decent writer. And then this thing called Google Penguin happened. I don't know how many listeners
Oh yeah.
remember it, but it was this big change in how Google valued links. So to your point about seasons, I saw this season changing. And that was also one thing I didn't like about what we were doing or potentially going to be doing, that we needed to do good content to generate the links that we needed. And that was a lot of the focus originally, was just pure links. And then over time realized, hey, we should be doing holistic, really good marketing, not just promoting infographics for links. So that became more of an emphasis. We got some great case studies. And then we actually were doing a ton of email outreach for a long, long time. And then I actually took a beat on that. It felt like links were a little less valued. Maybe that approach was not going to be as helpful. Still had a few niche in fintech specifically clients. And that took a little pause for a year or two. This brings us to about this year. I've had more of an aha recently to actually that this idea of like data first digital PR is actually more valuable than it ever has been, with just the onset of AI being differentiated, having content that's not the same as everything else on the search results. So it's almost, we're not going quite back to where it was before, but we are thinking more about that kind of content. And so that's sort of, to your point, Jimmy, the season we're in right now.
And that's really interesting. What are your customers asking about, and how has that changed recently? Like, are you sensing the same kind of maybe skepticism, I guess, about SEO, or at least kind of like, hey, let's get back to basics and not just chase keywords all the time? Like, are those questions, are they inbound, and then see just saying, okay, all right, there's obviously a trend here of our customers are asking this or that, or they want these things, so now we need to reconfigure our offerings?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we've been thinking more about the secondary value we generate. We need to be communicating that. If there is more AI overview traffic eating into what we do, like we just started the process of reporting referral, direct traffic to the content sections. We're creating a lot of content on. Like that was a percentage of the pie we didn't even talk about previously. And that's sort of the thought process there is two-sided. One, clearly communicate the value of the full things we do. But two, that offers a diversification path in a world where search is a little smaller as a pie. If you do good content marketing, as you're well aware, like you are doing more than just an SEO driven thing. And hopefully that also helps us think that way. So I do think there's more of that. I mean, we've always been known for SEO, so I can't say there's pessimism. There tends to be, there was nervousness. I think more executive questions came of like, what's going to happen with this AI overview and what does the future look like? But I think once we got over that initial release of those overviews and it wasn't the apocalypse, does feel like things are picking up a little, whether it's directly that or maybe the economy getting a little better. I'm not quite sure, but maybe a little both.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I feel like there was this wave of like, oh my gosh, SEO is going to go away. Now there was this really beautiful silver lining to that, which is that it seems like a lot of folks are just kind of getting back to basics. It's like, well, we can be discovered in search if we just write good content, instead of, I think, the over indexing on playing the game, the SEO game. Like if we're not all just chasing the A+ in ClearScope all the time, a very helpful tool. But
Yes.
and I have a lot of respect for Bernard and the team there. But there is this other element of like, if you just make it good on its own, like that's going to get you found in search and other places.
Agreed. I mean, that also love Bernard and ClearScope. It's especially valuable in B2B tech SaaS, but we'll often say it's actually good to be like A- or even B+ optimized if you're truly solving for users. And hopefully that wave of the user experience will carry you to what is a true A+, especially over time.
Yeah. What does the average customer engagement look like? I mean, is everybody getting content, SEO, strategy, reporting? Are there other elements like multimedia or anything else?
That's something we're doing more of, whether it's a industry change or just something we're just doing more. I can't say for sure in terms of just trying to have more revenue streams, but we are doing more SEO consulting than we did in the past. We brought on great leader Jesse McDonald from IBM, so that was part of that push for sure. But we're now doing more of that kind of consultative deliverable. And we are doing outreach in that product-led digital PR more than we had been in the last 2 years. So more of that outreach, more of the things that maybe you couldn't just go straight to a freelancer and do because of
Yeah.
relationships we have and things like that are also some of our thought process. Like there is a lot more in speaking of your seasons, like I think in some ways we were lucky or had good timing of kind of riding the wave up of this industry growing. And now there is a lot more competition. I think a lot got washed out in the last year or so for sure, but it's more competitive out there for content services on average.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay. So you mentioned you have 100 people or more than 100. I was on the
Approximately
website.
100. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was on the website before I got on this call on the about page, and I just kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And I thought, there's a lot of people here. You're bigger than I thought. You know what I mean? In terms of headcount, quite a bit larger than I thought, actually. I have been at a fast growing agency. It was very chaotic, a lot of difficult things. Um, actually, I don't know. I could probably name 5 or 6 agencies off the top of my head right now that have downsized significantly over the past year and a half. I would love to know more about the growth of Siege. Obviously there's the demand, right? Capturing the demand, but building the team, the operations. Again, this is like almost too big of a question to throw at you all at once, but like, what has that been like? How have you managed to scale the company in a healthy way?
A lot of credit goes to our COO, Melissa Holmes. She's very strong and it really helped us kind of slow down and help me slow down. I think my problem as a founder is I would go in, fix fires like in 5 seconds. And similarly, I'd be like, let's start this client tomorrow. Can we start it tomorrow? And she'll say, for the health of the team, for the client experience to be good, we need to take 10 business days from contract signing to do that. And like little small things like that and giving us pace to our process has been really helpful. And I think it is very difficult to like rocket ship grow an agency. I was telling you before we started recording that I have yet to see that not eventually go poorly just because the people dynamics are, as everyone is aware, it's just so difficult to scale that. And one of the problems with that scale beyond just putting the nuts and bolts together is you end up promoting people ahead of like when they're ready to be promoted a lot in that dynamic. So you end up with like managers and directors that are 23 and maybe 23 managers. Okay. But you get what I'm saying. You get ahead of your skis and eventually that breaks down normally.
Yeah. Were you remote prior to COVID?
We were remote friendly. So it was a very natural transition that we made that choice pretty quickly.
Okay. Got it. What I was sort of getting at is the culture, right? Like 100 people, a company of that size has to have culture in order to, just keep people on the same page, but hopefully attract people who share the same values as you and the leadership team. How much effort have you put into that over the last 12 years? And is that still something that you talk about pretty actively?
For sure. And it's always a work in progress. We've got another thing our team has worked on. We have something called a people experience team. So we'll kind of do light things to just create engagement. It has been harder to bring people together when you have 100. It's just hard to scale that idea.
Yeah.
So we haven't transparently, but we've done micro meetups in each location where people come together, or there's a conference, things of that nature. But that people experience team has been helpful, having people own that process. And I think there's some luck maybe to having an established culture that transitioned into that remote environment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That maybe would not have gone as well in the reverse. Like we have a lot of legacy people that are still with us that were part of that in person. So they kind of get it and bring it forward, which probably helps. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's funny, just thinking about that was probably like 2015, maybe, when like company retreats were like a huge deal. And every SaaS company would write blog posts with the pictures, and then like Buffer would rent out like an Olympic village because they couldn't find anywhere else to house all these people. Like that seems to have all gone by the wayside. Sounds like fun, but that doesn't seem like people really do that anymore. Um, were there, just kind of going back to the remote thing, I can definitely imagine like, okay, you're kind of remote friendly, and then forcing remote. That's like a huge advantage given that like everyone was sort of forced to some degree to go remote during the pandemic. Were there some unexpected speed bumps, I guess, like as you were making that transition and just kind of like getting everybody using the same tools or kind of more documentation or the different meeting schedule, things like that?
Yes. So there was a segment of people that wanted to be in house or in person, and we lost those people. It wasn't a huge number, but they were there, and that was part of it. And then you hit on a very important transition. I forget what initially triggered my excitement around it, and the original, like, one of the first really well-known remote companies just had a whole like wiki of documentation, and we had done it all in person previously, and there was just some moment where we just sprinted towards learning and development and building a ton of process documents and videos. And now we have a training library with hundreds upon hundreds of documents, maybe too many documents, but we also have now at our size, someone owning learning and development, actually two amazing people that are doing that at Siege. So that's been super helpful, and kind of building that process and consistency, which you just had to have as a remote company.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, at least in my experience, the biggest challenge of being part of a quickly growing agency was, well, the solution was documentation in many cases. The problem was just that the element of scale is people. So there's just this lot of variables, right? It's not like we're going to hire a bunch of people to all grow one software product. Like we're going to hire a bunch of people. They'll be client facing. They'll be making decisions. They'll be doing work in a certain way or not, depending on whether or not you train them to do it that way. It was just so much harder than I thought to get everybody on the same page, write it down, train people, but ultimately, like over time becomes in some ways like the bedrock of the business. If people is your growth vector.
Yeah, agreed. And you made me think of something I didn't mention. I'm like, those were some of the tips, some things that, I mean, we haven't, like, hopefully we get back to hiring more often, but when we were in a similar, very sharp growth period, we'd have like, we would only hire 5 people at a time. It'd be like a cohort that was all our learning and development director could handle and like be tailored to do. So there'd be cohorts of 5 every single month. And we kind of cycle through that. And you can imagine how you just let everyone through the gates, like all that consistency of onboarding is pretty brutal. And her being the point of contact that says the exact same things over and over, solve for manager inconsistencies, which were inevitable. So that's been some of the, I think, maybe it's not secret sauce, but helpful things that's worked.
Yeah. How about your role? What does your role look like today, and how has that changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm constantly trying to become more of a CEO than I have been. My weakness, as many probably founders, are getting too in the weeds, and that's kind of enables you to scale. So I try to think of a few things each quarter that are big picture ideas that we can implement. Melissa, our COO, tells me we can only do one normally. That's kind of how it goes as part of this as well. So that's kind of the staggering. I'm definitely doing a lot of marketing. Big customer relationship stuff is a big part of my work. I still do a lot of sales. I was just on a proposal call, but we've got a great director of business development now as well. So I'm really just kind of the pinch hitter now rather than the full-time person. So, but I'm still really enjoying strategy. So I'm paying attention, checking in on those things, bringing new thoughts to the team. So still hopefully in the weeds, but the right amount in the weeds. We'll see. Yeah.
Nice. That's cool. One thing, sort of going back to the origin story, there's, this comes up a lot in the Slack community. Freelancers who talk about like, what's next for me? Like, if I don't want to be a freelancer for my whole career, what are my options? One of those options is to see if you can drum up more demand and start subcontracting the work and maybe build an agency one day. Uh, Easier said than done, obviously. And the question I want to ask you is, do you remember the first time that you had too much demand, or more demand than you could handle yourself, and what it was like to get somebody else to come and help you do that work?
Yes, pretty vividly. My thought process was, what is the thing I should most outsource of what I'm doing? And then at that time, this is not legal advice, but I started with just like a part-time contractor. I think when you're smaller, we have very few contractors today. It's almost all full-time people at Siege. That's more okay to do. You take a little less risk, giving like 20 hours to somebody. That should be feasible. And if you're local, you could handhold that person. They don't you if you're that you might be able to build more of a relationship. Like my first full-time person, Brian Vu, was amazing. And I don't know if that was coincidence or just because we worked together so closely, but he started just 20 hours and it was just kind of a threshold. I subleased someone's office that I knew, and that relationship helped. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if that answer helps necessarily, but I had built up a little bit of cash reserve, not any wild amount, and started to just get enough demand that I could make that jump to the part-time contractor. Which worst case
Yeah,
scenario, you move on. You're not paying them health insurance. It's probably for most people that are just content agencies, they could find someone with some hustle that wants to grow their career. That hopefully is not
yeah,
too much risk. Yeah.
yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think I think there's a real opportunity for freelancers out there to create what I would maybe call like a micro agency. Like there's not many agencies that are going to scale to 100 people. I think there's lots of small agencies that could scale to 3 or 5 people and be great businesses for the folks who found them. And while maybe that's not as exciting or romantic, I think that's like a very realistic goal for a freelancer. So anyways, kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole there. The other thing I want to ask you about is, one reason I love having agency founders on this podcast is because they have a very broad view of what's happening right now. Whereas the in-house folks, they have like this very sort of acute awareness of what's happening at their company right now. The agency founder can see a lot more. Are you seeing, well, I guess I'll phrase, there's sort of 2 questions here. One is, are you noticing any red flags? Like, as prospects come in the door, they want this service or that. Like, are you noticing that people are asking for what you believe maybe is the wrong thing? And then on the opposite side of that, are there green flags where folks are coming in and asking for things they haven't asked for before that you think like, yes, this is what we should be doing?
Yeah, good question. So starting on the red flag, you make me think, which maybe is not pertinent to all your audience, but we used to get a lot of people just pure link ass, and I feel like we get less of those. And they were almost, I have like a video on it. Normally when people ask for link building versus content marketing, it's the wrong philosophy, or the business isn't doing well generally when I see that. So the good news is that's starting to kind of tailor off a little bit. I do think people are resonating with the just data-driven approach. I mean, why wouldn't they be? It's just we have kind of figured out a process to make that work a little bit more. Um, I mean, you get questions about AI. I don't think it's been like too heavy-handed. We tend to work mid-market to enterprise, so they understand this is competitive and needs to be really good stuff. I mean, there's price sensitivity for sure out there. I think it's been starting to tick up. Like we're in July 2024, we're feeling positive after kind of just stability was hopefully we felt really good about being flat in the last year or so. And hopefully it's ticking up. And that was, I think I was telling you before the call, like seeing past the AI overview event, and maybe that there's a hit and it's probably going to keep coming in terms of what they roll out. But I think a lot of paranoia, understandably so, came from that rollout.
Sure.
And it feels like a lot of the gates, especially with rate cuts, hopefully coming in September, I don't think it'll ever be the fervor of 2020, but we should hopefully expect some growth again.
Yeah, for sure. Those were good times. I wish I had appreciated them more when they were happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, the AI thing is so interesting because I feel like we went through this phase of like, okay, ChatGPT comes out. Every CMO in the world is like, we don't need a content team. This is only $20 a month. And it's like, 60% is good. And now it's like, then we went to this phase of like total fatigue. And everyone was like, wait, all we can do is find small efficiencies in our content workflows. Like I can't, you know what I mean? It's like not going to replace us. And now I feel like we're getting into this healthier spot of like, of course you should use AI. Like why wouldn't you use it? But like, let's be smart about it. Let's use it in a thoughtful way. Like let's still try to differentiate the content, make it true to the brand, like make it worth reading. And if we can save ourselves some time, then great, let's do that. That could be completely blown up 6 months from now, depending on how the technology changes, I guess.
I mean, I think that's correct. I think that'll be the way it goes. I mean, we're just thinking of like, we'll keep an eye on it. We've been using it for editing, line and grammar editing, qualitative checks now. It's almost like a secondary SME, definitely just keyword research speed ups.
Yeah.
Just very briefly starting to test some writing. Like maybe super long tail of topics we would have never gotten to. It could be worth exploring for some clients, but we have clients with some real risk there to their brand if it's done improperly. But I've heard some good things about Claude and the like. So yeah, we need to we have to pay attention to it, I think, as an industry. For sure. Get left behind. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking to a content marketer just the other day about how they were using Claude to run a programmatic SEO playbook, right? So it's like they identify, it was like a comparison style content of like thing A versus thing B, thing A versus thing C, thing B versus that type of thing. And then like Claude was writing it. And it was, I mean, if you're going to do 5,000 of those, AI is fantastic. And it's like just as good as if you're going to pay somebody $20 a page or whatever to write it. So anyways, I agree. Keep an eye on it. Cool stuff. Anything going on at Siege these days that you want to talk about that I have failed to ask you about?
Good question. In terms of what I can talk about right now, probably not. But I mean, I think things are getting better. That might be the optimistic view that a lot of your listeners might want to hear. Is like I feel more optimism generally. Things are generally picking up, feeling that across the market, and we're still not out of the trough yet. So the fact that a lot of that paranoia, I think, has subsided a little bit, even if people have some concerns, I think it is a positive thing. So we're kind of going with that. And a lot of your listeners are more kind of holistically minded than purely SEO like us. But I do think thinking organically, thinking broader than just SEO, which many people are doing. It's just the critical thing and more of what we're doing today.
Yeah. Cool. My view is not as broad as yours, like certainly not as many customers, but it's representative. Like I feel many of the same things that you're just describing, like that really resonates. And I'm feeling, just more hopeful and a little more calm than I felt in a long time. I no longer feel like we're at some huge risk of the whole thing just going away. Like it's evolving, obviously, and there's actually maybe a fun component to it too, not just it's all scaredness. So anyways.
Hopefully not the interject.
Yeah, you're
going to say, then we also, I don't think it'll shake anything, but it will probably. It's like, of course we get through that whole thing and we have an election coming up in the US. So that'll probably
just be
cause
fun.
More concern, paranoia. So that's the next thing to be afraid of. So
Totally. Cool. Hey, Ross, thanks so much for coming on. Seriously, it's awesome to chat. Like I said, I followed your stuff for a long time. I think I actually probably first discovered you and Siege through the YouTube video. So I don't know, maybe bring that back one day. I thought like the in-person interviews were really cool. Anyways, I followed you ever since and really value your take on things and appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Jimmy. And I extended an invite to you to come on our podcast and maybe search content and conversation in a month, and we'll have Jimmy return the favor. Unfortunately, not in person, but hopefully a version close to it.
Yeah. Count me in. Sounds like fun. Awesome. Thanks, Ross. We'll point everybody in the show notes to Siege. They can go check it out, read the blog, check out the services, all that good stuff. So check the link in the show notes, and we'll talk to you soon, Ross.
Thank you.
Take care.